Welcome to Navigating the Art World from Curating to Intellectual Property. It's great to see so many of you here on a summer Friday afternoon. We have so much fun working on this program with our wonderful co-sponsors, Kotra IP, and our partners, Korean Association of New York Artists, Korean Startups and Entrepreneurs, and the Korean Cultural Service New York. Today's audience represents all of these organizations combined. So there may be a lot of you here at the Korea Society for the first time. So I would like to say a quick introduction, and I promise to be short. We are a non-for-profit dedicated to promoting discussion and exchange of ideas and culture between Koreans and Americans. And we present interesting panels like today, as well as language classes, cooking workshops, films, and lectures throughout the year. So check out our website for upcoming events, as we hope to see all of you again. And if you're not already a member, please consider joining, because membership fees allow us to present great programs like today's. So following this ad, I'm pleased to introduce our great friend, Joseph Jun from Kotra, who will introduce today's panelists. Thank you and enjoy the event.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, the Korea Society, for your partnership and allowing us to use this beautiful space for the event to take place. So with the money that we save from having to rent another venue, we purchased a lot of wine for reception. So stick around until the end. Kotra, as you guys may or may not know, is a Korean government agency. We are the trade arm of Korean government. So our mission is to basically help Korean companies from Korea and do business here in the US. I'm in charge of intellectual property desk, which entails, it was created in the advent of Samsung versus Apple, right? So there's a lot of IP disputes for Korean companies and individuals as well, such as artists, as stated here. So we try to organize events to educate the public and companies about more, whether it's a trademark disputes, copyright disputes, patent disputes, design disputes, and so forth. So today we have three fantastic speakers and a beautiful moderator. Sharon is actually my ninth cousin, and we've discovered that. How many times do you get to meet your ninth cousin? It's crazy. We just discovered that a month ago. But you guys are in safe hands. Have fun. Come talk to me if you have any questions about IP Desk, and I'll pass on to Sharon.
Thank you, distant cousin. All right, well, happy Friday. It's almost the weekend. Before we get to the talk for the evening, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Sharon Song, and I am a journalist in the greater New York area. I'm also a weather anchor, so I might throw in a forecast for you, maybe for the end. So we have three very fantastic speakers. I think I have one of the greatest jobs in the world because I got to meet all these amazing people in New York, and I'm just very excited to get started with this talk. So we have Ms. Christina Hee-Young Kang, Mr. Jonathan Sirota, and Iris In-hee Moon. And if you guys could briefly describe what you guys do and how you fell into the art world, so that we kind of get an idea and just of what we can expect to hear from you guys tonight.
Should I pass the? Can you guys hear? Cool. All right. Okay. Hi, I'm Christina. My Korean name's Hee-kyung, and last name's Kang. So, I'm an art advisor, art consultant, art dealer. They're all the same. It's all falling into the same categories. I advise for collectors who have a museum or private collection. They want to build their collections into art. And the corporation. So I work for my clients. So whoever they have a certain budget, certain taste, or certain direction or vision, I work according to their plan. So it's like business consulting, but I advise for them. So that's basically what I do. So I'll get into that a little more in depth when you guys have any, when Sharon leads it, and then when you guys have questions. So
my name is Jonathan Sirota. I have my own law firm, Sirota Law Firm. We focus on entertainment, business, and technology matters. Our clients are about 50% international and 50% from the US. We get into deals where, well, I'll tell you about myself first. I am the former general counsel of Dow Jones and Hearst Joint Ventures. where we worked on a lot of media, new digital media, and talent agreements, and also publishing distribution agreements with the new publishing models around the world. Prior to that, I was the attorney for entertainment and syndication divisions at Hearst Entertainment, where I represented cartoon characters, the famous Popeye and Betty Boop characters, and Flash Gordon. All of those characters are IP based. They all have been rendered in many different types of statues and fine artworks and apparel and collectibles and pop art. So a lot of artistic and IP issues come up, and there's a collector's market out there for some of the old vintage stuff, and it's a very interesting experience. Currently, we work with small and large companies. We work with individual artists and collectives. We help them navigate the contracting, negotiation, and most importantly, the position they're in after they sign the agreement. That last part is often overlooked by most attorneys because most attorneys worked solely at law firms. I've worked in house, I was always part of the deal. So the business affairs is equally as important as the legal affairs. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Inhee Iris Moon, and as you see in this program, I'm an independent curator, and that comes with a lot of baggage, and we could expand that to many different levels. But basically, what I do is I do curate on all different levels, from a commercial gallery show to a museum show, nonprofit organizations, art fairs, biennales, art festivals, you name it. I kind of do it. It's kind of expands out to collecting and managing private corporate collections. And then I also do consulting works to a lot of galleries and collectors. And these days, I also do city plannings because many cities in the Asian countries now want to develop the cities not only into the modern cities but modern cultural cities. So these are basically what I do, and I hope I could talk about it a little bit more later.
Wow, that's an impressive resume for each one of you guys. Thanks for the introduction. So I'll start with Ms. King. I have a question for each one of you. There's this general notion that art collection is only for the wealthy, and maybe not for the average person. Maybe you could give me a little bit more feedback on whether or not this stereotyping is true or accurate, and if you've dealt with cases that
Sure.
weren't really that
I-
fell into
yeah.
this.
I'll disagree, but agree in certain senses, which I'll talk about it. I grew up in a collecting family. My father is a collector. And, when I'll share some experience with you. When I was little, we have 4 siblings. And when I was in second grade, my father brought the big nude woman. And he, look what I got. And we were like, oh my God. But it was so beautiful. And he was like, this is a beautiful painting, oil painting by artist that's about to, be famous, but I got a good deal, and he hung there. We were like, oh my God, nude woman, what is she doing at our house? But ever since that grew me into the point where, oh my God, that is so beautiful. And then, that's how I started with, through my father's passion. And then he didn't have much money back then, but he had money whenever he had a salaryman, but he was entrepreneur after that. Gather money as in did an installment and got all this important painters collection. So I thought growing up with a passionate collecting family, which is my father, I thought everybody knew about art. And I thought everybody loves art. Everybody knows about art, but it's not about the knowing. It's about appreciating it. So that I knew. And after that, when I got into the professional field, and it was very difficult for me to do the business. But what I thought was the most important thing is educating people, train their eyes, and be patient. And say if they don't know, because this art world can be very intimidating. It's true. Like when a lot of people, I've been doing art tour for education for over 10 years. I still do, and it's for the education purpose. That goes into my commercial also consulting, but they always go like, oh my God, do I have to pay to get into the gallery? It was like, no, 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 free, free. It's like, oh, really? But beautiful girls and the desk, and there's so much intimidating. There's no label. It's like, yeah, just appreciate it, learn it, and then just if you don't think it's, excuse my language, but shitty work, then just shitty. It's not, into you. You don't have to say because what people think is a great art. If you don't think is a great art, then say it. It's fine. So that's how I think they fall into. You don't have to be really rich or to have a lot. You don't have to be a Rockefeller to collect art because you can start by collecting like limited edition, a print, and you can switch with your artist friends saying like, hey, you know what, I will support you. I'll pay for your material fee, and then God knows, Jeff Koons wasn't the Jeff Koons 20 years ago. Who knows about throwing the ideas of talent that you believe in it, and might be the one artist that you really, yeah. So I think that's another thing. But second, yes, I do know that there's a big art collector who I advise for conglomerate families and corporation. Yes, they do have a certain budget. Money makes money. So if they were to buy 1.5 million 10 years ago or something, Gerald Richter or Jeff Koons, after 10 years they sold for 8-9 mil. I mean, how on earth that you get 6.5 million in 10 years, right? So that's the other case too. So I'm just verifying the one case that you don't have to be Rockefeller to buy art to be a collector, and the other side, yes, you do. Money makes money. There are people who are like that. That's two categories that I also deal with. So, that's through my experience and simplify.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks for that. So, would you say that your father kind of helped you
Yeah.
shape your eye
Mm.
to find the
Very
art
much
pieces?
so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I brought the auction. He's 80, so he has so many arts. So I brought the auction specialist because, oh, I'm short of cash. It's like, so I brought the auction specialist, sell it, right? And he went on and on about how he bought that piece. So ended up not selling it. Only talked about the storytelling, his experience. It's like, why did I call this guy? And he's, no, I have cash, enough cash. So that's where he had a passion he'll never sell, I know. Yeah.
Well, my next question is for Mr. Sirota. I know you have this legal background, but also a passion for entertainment and for art. So, how has being a lawyer helped you in your artistic pursuit?
That's a great question. I also started off my parents taking me to museums as a child. I thought everybody went to museums. I didn't realize it was a privilege. I grew up with a sensitivity to art. I really enjoyed when I saw something beautiful that I'd never seen before. And as I matured in life, I tried my hand at painting and sculpting and many other things, and it didn't work out so well. None of my works were sold at auction. But I did learn that I have a passion for seeing art in things that may not be traditionally artistic, such as, and this is how you ruin anybody's party, you say contracts and transactions are beautiful things. They're artistic. In my book, yes, there are a lot of contracts you can download from Google and feel that you're protected, but there's an art. When they talk about the practice of law, it's an art. Probably 1% of the attorneys have the luxury of saying they practice that art. Most of what they do, and not their fault, is based upon what the judges decide. It's been decided, and you have to do it the same way as all of the other attorneys. I discovered when you represent artists and you deal with copyright and intellectual property and trademarks, you can carve it up in so many different ways, and there are new angles and new technologies. It's a very exciting area. And I was able to bring my love for art into the practice of law in this exciting area. One of the kindest things that a client said to me, it's a very difficult and eccentric, and one if he watches this video, I love him to death. But he pushes me and he makes sure that I do my job, and he's very intelligent. sometimes people think artists are good at art but not good at business. It's not true. The successful artists, the big difference between them and the rest of the artists is they're equally as good at business as they are at art. And he said to me, you know why I like working with you? Because you have a very artistic approach to dealing with the transaction. I never thought of it the way you thought of it. I thought of it as A plus B equals C. You taught me there are many more letters in the alphabet. And it was a nice compliment. So hopefully that responds to your question.
So we'll talk more about art and business in further depth in just a bit. But first, I do want to get to our last speaker. So you've curated so many exhibitions. I was able to check them out online. And most notably, you've worked with Namjoon Paik. Please tell us more about how you first came in contact with him and just some more about your experiences.
Okay, I knew this was gonna come up, but it's really exciting to talk about Namjoon Paik. Not only because he is, one of the most brilliant artists of our time, but also because he's Korean, well, Korean American, and also because he sort of occupies this area of art that it starts out with an analog mode, but goes into technical and then digital. So when you talk about Namjoon Paik, you could talk about just about anything. He has beautiful drawings that he starts out with, but he also has editions. But he's the one who started the video art, and then that now transfers to what everything now is digitized, and we get to see his video sculptures and installation everywhere. But people constantly raise questions about now where are we going with all this, right? With all these advances of technology and media and things. Now, who is the person to judge to what extent is original Namjoon Paik and to what extent becomes something else? There are just a lot of questions, and I think that's really exciting because that's what sort of so sustains and perpetuates the arts world, right? Otherwise, everything's been done, and and we have no more to talk about. Just so happy to be here with actually John and Christina because when you're working with a bunch of artists and when you're working as a curator, you don't really get to talk to other disciplines like really like the commerce or the lawful disciplines. But my going back to your question, my relationship with Namjoon Paik started, of course, in school. While I was in Goldsmith, I studied about this genius who studied the media artwork. But he seems so distant to me because I obviously studied something else. I actually wrote about Hannah Wilke and the feminist movement in the 70s and stuff. But in 2005, when he announced that he was going to do the last performance in the Green Street studio, that was actually in November 2005, I was just shocked. And I was sent to the performance as one of the media person from Art and Culture. And at that time, I was also working at the New Museum when the New Museum was not on Bowery, but on Broadway. This was with Dan Cameron and Lisa Phillips, and we all were there to witness this last performance, thinking, why? Why would he announce that he would do this last performance? He was still alive, But anyway, this was the last performance of Namjoon Paik, and what he did was he actually did a little piano playing performance, and what he played was arirang. I don't know. You all know arirang, right? He himself played arirang in a very, I don't know, I wouldn't say this was like the most beautiful, musically inclined performance, but this was really, really violent, sort of like really bashful type of thing. And at the end, he tore up the music pieces, and he actually circulated the little music pieces of arirang to everybody and asked everybody to eat it. That was part of that was part of the performance, and there I was, I guess, young budding curator, and an art writer, eating this piece of arirang, and thinking, oh my God, we're doing a communion. This is communion. You are what you eat. And basically, that's exactly what he was doing by eating this piece of namjoon paek. Well, Korea's traditional music, arirang, you become sort of piece of that music, and you become part of Korea and all that. It was so moving. So I ended up writing to him and his studio that I wanted to do an interview with him. So I did. I did an interview with him. That ended up being a last interview. And that was, so how I started with him was, through his last performance, and then I did the last interview, and then we got kind of close, Namjoon Paek and the studio and everything, and they asked me if I would participate in the last piece that he created, which is now in the National Gallery of Washington, D.C. The piece is called Oma, and this is a beautiful, peach color 19th century kids costume, which has a monitor inside, and there are three girls playing and yelling Oma, Oma, and those girls happen to be my own kids. So that was the last work of Namjoon Paek. So that's how I started with him. And then in 2006, in February, two curators, Eugene Huang and Jian Kim, and I decided that we want to do an international video art exhibit at the Korean Culture Center, homaging to Namjoon Paek. So this was 30 artists plus 31 person being homage to, and then him and his studio also decided to give us a nice piece of work. I think it was Suite 212 and a couple of other works. And there, I don't know what happened, but that happened to be our homage to him. But he actually passed away during our show. So everything changed. Everything changed. We had to change the display 3 times to accommodate to international guests and, local art related people who wanted to come and make tribute to Namjoon Paek and everything. So kind of interestingly, everything started at in the end, and then I started to curate his show, posthumously, and then last year in 2012 I did the 80th birth anniversary of Namjoon Paek at the Seoul Olympic Museum of Art. So that was my 11th show for PAC. So I know it's a very long story, but I get very emotional because this is very personal endeavor as well as public. So that's how we started.
Are there a lot of times where you have to think on your feet like that? With his passing, I know it must have been
Yes.
a lot of things going through your head, and you have to
Right.
kind of change the display of a lot of
Yeah.
of the entire layout, like you are kind
Right.
of saying. So,
Right.
are there a lot of cases where you have to think on your feet like that?
No. You rarely ever change an installation. Once the display is complete, that's it. We do maybe little changes of labels or things like that, but never an entire show to actually accommodate a bigger issue, a funeral, something like that. But yeah, so that's how we started. I don't want to just go on to this. Yeah, I want to continue. Right.
So, with all three of you, you guys are all artists, but also businessmen and businesswomen. Are there times where you have to compromise some of your passion in art with money making? Or are there cases where you just kind of found yourself conflicted between the two?
Everything is compromising.
And I'm always conflicted.
I'll start with. I'm gonna share with you guys like very openly my experience. I think that's what you don't want to have boring conversation anyway here. I wanted to share with you something that I went to RISD. I went to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. I went there because my God, my parents say, oh, it's the best school. Korean parents, of course. You go to the best ones. Okay. I went to the best art school, which I didn't know was the best, but it was really the best art school, which I learned so much. So I wasn't thinking that I'm becoming an artist, but I was like, okay, I went to school in Switzerland, so I didn't know anything about American school. So I came back, I went to RISD, and then when I was drawing something, and I said, oh my God, I'm an artist. I want to be an artist. So my professor told me, you should be an artist. And on the third, my junior year. And I was really hesitant. It's like my father is a business person, my mother is a social worker, but so I called my dad and said, you know what? My teacher told me I should be an artist. It's like, okay, you make your own money after you graduate. I don't know, for a 19, 20 years old girl who was supported by tuition, when someone said, it's like, oh my God, I shouldn't be an artist, okay? So I changed a little bit more to commercial, like a designer to do, because I majored in textile design. But I had always a passion about art. The reason why I'm saying so was I became an art dealer after going to school at NYU for art administration. I opened my company in 1999. And I've been buying a lot of art collection, artists, young artists, because you know why? It's compensating my passion. By me paying a little bit of money, no matter 100,000, whatever, that gives them a great amount of encouragement. And the materials, you know how expensive the materials are? The charcoal, oil painting. At some point I was gonna save some material fee, and I bought some cheap, little bit cheaper materials. It didn't come out well. And I was like, oh my God, material fees are expensive. So that was, to me, was such a great, in a way, I'm glad I changed as an art advisor who has an artistic background, who understand the discouragement and then sorrows and all this, feelings of artists. But on the other side, high-end people, they're very demanding, Of course, when people have money, they think they own the whole world. I mean, depends on the quality of the money. But yes, they have a big demand because once they buy 6, 7 figures, I mean, it's for them, it's like hobby. 6, 7 figures to buy art pieces are how many money do you have to, that's just as a hobby, right? So for high demand families or one wealthy individual to deal with the artist like that as a middle person, bridge builder, I'm always constantly compromising with myself first and then both of them to balance. So always about compromising, always about negotiating, always about what's right, what's wrong, but to make everybody happy. That's the hardest way. But first you have to be happy first of your job. So I'm very happy with my job first. So that's maybe probably the way I do in a joyful way. So
Compromise obviously goes hand in hand with what I'm supposed to do for my client is help them reach a compromise. Before I can negotiate with a gallery or with a consignment seller or any type of transaction, even a display and transportation and insurance arrangement, I need to make sure that my client understands what it is they're negotiating away. Most clients understand the price. They understand the time, the place. There are a lot of other issues that if I don't bring up to my clients, they don't realize they're giving them away. I often have a client come into me and say, they want to keep this simple. We have one page. Everything looks good to me. It's good to sign, right? That's how the conversation begins. So I know it's an uphill battle to get my client to understand that there's maybe more to the deal that should be on the page, should be on 5 pages. So I need to educate them. I need to educate them as to what, and then this is for any legal deal. You know what you're offering as the offeror, and the offeree knows what they're trying to accept and pay for. However, my job is to make sure my client understands what they're leaving on the table, something that is completely foreign to them. And I have to not turn them into an attorney, but I have to get them to feel what I call are the pain points of being an artist in the business world. On the personal note, since we're keeping this casual, I think all things happen for a reason. I spent my wild youth in Japan, going to university there. I followed up after finishing up university in the US, went back to Japan, and I worked for the Ministry of Culture, Fair, Education, Sports, and Science. It was a fun place to be, and I decided to go back to school. So I went to law school after that. Didn't know why I went to Japan. It was something that I thought would be a great adventure. Many years later, as an attorney, I'm representing Popeye and Betty Boop. Our greatest source of revenue outside the US is Japan and Korea. I knew a lot about Japan. I didn't know much about Korea. So I started learning more about Korea at that point. Fast forward, and we're talking about compromises. After I set up my own law firm and I was building my practice, it's organically growing, word of mouth, and it's going very well. I had some free time. And I had just finished a long period of time being general counsel and entertainment attorney at large corporations. Now I'm running my own business. And this is the first time I had the pleasure or displeasure or privilege of tasting what it means to buy less expensive materials to get by, what it means to negotiate with somebody because you need the business as opposed to having a big corporation behind you. And those early years were shocking to me. I didn't realize how difficult it gets when everything is personal. Moving a little bit more forward, I also never let go of my artistic dreams. And part of what I did at the large corporations was movie financing, production, pre-production, post-production, monetization, publishing of cartoon characters and animation deals, production. I enjoyed it. So I figured I'll do it for myself. So I opened up my own feature film production company. We've produced a feature film. I'm executive producing. I'm loving this area, but I'm realizing I'm making compromises on all these deals I would never let my clients make. It's very hypocritical. And last, before we move on, I decided to go one step further. I opened up my own manhwa and manga publishing company. We go to Korea and Japan, we go to the underground, find the hottest authors who are maybe have a full-time job. And they draw the manga, manhwa on the weekends, and they trade it among each other. A lot of digital trading going on. And the large corporations don't want to back them because it's not immediately monetizable. My partner and I were bootstrapped. We have a startup, and we said to them, how about we introduce you to the world in English through our imprint, and overnight, everybody will know you outside of your country. And we have Korean manhwa and Japanese manga, and it's being distributed through Barnes & Noble and Amazon, and the company is growing and growing and growing. And everybody asks us, where do you get this content? And my partner and I, we always say, we're surprised you don't know where. It's called Korea. It's called Japan. And I'll leave you with that. But with that company as well, I made a lot of compromises I would never encourage my clients to do. But it became personal. And I think it improved me as an attorney, and I didn't expect that.
Yeah, compromises for me as a curator. Curatorial expression is just like any other artistic expression. It's an expression, and you kind of start out with something very big, ideal, romantic, or whatever. But the reality says something different. You have to consider budget, labor, time, effort, hosting venue or whatever. So it's a constant struggle between what you want to do and what you actually can do. And instead of actually saying compromises, I kind of think it's moderating, and also adjusting, and it's a constant process in my practice. It's without it, you could almost do nothing because you're not gonna be able to just get, let's say, $500 budget and then, okay, I'm gonna just do $500 show. It doesn't work like that. So, as it's not as negative or it's not as sacrificing. Compromise is something that I enjoy and I make. I actively do in my practice.
Yeah, it's great that you see it as a task and,
It
and
is,
you enjoy it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about intellectual property. So, Mr. Sirota, I know you specialize in IP law, and I think for people like me that are not very familiar with legal terms, I know you dealt with dozens of cases where IP infringement was an issue. If you could maybe just maybe give us some examples of some of these cases where it was a challenge for you, and maybe just walk us through some of these essential art IP law, I guess basic terms that people like me wouldn't expect or would know right off the bat from just glancing at an artwork or just reading off the paper. What are some of these things that that you go through as a lawyer, and just seeing some of these cases kind of unfold in front of you?
Thank you. Well, I'm very jealous of everybody here because you walk through life. You walk through department stores and supermarkets. You watch movies, and nobody is thinking, "Oh, is that a trademark? Is that a copyright? Oh, that's a new brand. They're changing." Yeah, it takes a little bit of the fun out of the surprise. But copyright, something that people use very often as a term without really understanding what it means. Because tonight we're talking about art, and I've dealt with fine art and pop art. I'll give you an example. One of my clients recently installed two statues on 42nd Street and 6th Avenue, right across from the Bank of America building. One statue is made of marble, the other out of polished steel. It's an Italian and U.S. cooperation agreement where they're financing the two iconic images of the country. The marble statue is a rendition of Michelangelo's David, and the polished steel statue is the iconic American superhero with his hands on his hips and a cape furling in the back. And the art is actually, it's made of layers, so if you go too close, you lose the shape. If you go too far, you see right through it. But if you go the right angle, you get to see both statues. It's a great project. This is how I came into the project. I came into the project where a contract had already been put into play. My very intelligent client and intelligent developers, they had the contract all worked out, and they brought me in the last minute. And I'm reading through the contract, and it's talking about manufacturing costs, installation, who bears the risk of loss when they're transporting the statues, when it's on the crane as opposed to being on the pedestal. And it's just, I'm reading it and it's beautiful. This is great. And we get to one clause, and you'd be surprised. It's a little tiny clause that said the sponsor that was going to pay for the installation would own all the rights in and to the statues. This is a problem. And it wasn't intentional. The folks drafting the agreement just simply assumed that's how it works. This is how it works. Copyright is expression. When somebody expresses something. And I'll leave you with, I won't go too deep into this. I'll leave you with an idea of, think about the statue. You can touch it, it's tangible. When I think about the statues, I think about this tangible fabrication of the expression embodied in the statue. But then I think about, wouldn't it be nice to take the statue and make little statues and sell them at high-end design stores? Wouldn't it be nice to take the statue and turn it into probably not T-shirts, but high-end maybe belt buckles, something very designed. You can do a lot with it. A copyright is an artistic work that's in a fixed medium. Once in a fixed medium, marble, could be computer code that's digitized and put on servers. It could be when you're doodling at work and you're on the phone and you draw this cartoon character on the side of the margin of your page. The moment you draw that, it's on a fixed medium. It exists, it's protected. The part that people don't understand is if you make something out of that image and you sell it, your copyright doesn't get sold together with the item. And you can make more items. And I guess there are a lot of artists here, so they understand that. Here's the problem with many agreements. Because the default position tends to be, well, if it doesn't say I'm giving you the copyright, you didn't get it. You'll probably win after spending $20,000 in legal fees to prove your case, as opposed to spending an hour with me and putting it in black and white saying, oh, by the way, you didn't get the copyright. it's still with me. They won't even get into court. So part of what I do as I said in the beginning, I like to make sure that I don't just give you what you're asking for. I leave you where you should be so you can keep creating as an artist. Having one lawsuit can take away 3 to 6 months of your life. And if $100 for a piece of art is inspirational, imagine how depressing it is to realize you're being punished for being artistic. So it's something to think about. And this trademarks is something separate from copyright, but think about copyright. Copyright, we're making them every day. Copyright can be cut up into many different packages and sold in different ways, shapes, and forms. Copyright is part of the Constitution of the United States, patents and copyrights, to give creators the incentive to create. We'll give them protection for a limited amount of time. And it's a shame when somebody doesn't want to take advantage of that protection. And the last thing I'll say is, if you are a starving artist and somebody wants to pay for your goods, depending on the deal, you might be able to get them to pay for your legal services as well, at least to a certain amount, because they know it's inherently unfair for an institution to reach out and say, I love your work, I'll give you $50 for it. They know it's unfair. A savvy artist, and I tell my clients all the time to say to them, let's do this deal, but I need a $500, $700 legal stipend. And if it's a monetizable deal, you can even use it as an advance, and they can earn it back later on if it's a commercial deal. So hopefully that helps you understand the dynamics and the importance of copyright.
And for Miss Moon and for Miss Kang, do you have your own experience relating to copyright, ownership, and other IP issues?
Yeah. All the time. Just kidding. Because I've been in business for 15 years now. And before then, it's for 10 years, really, art world, you don't make a lot of money. You just do it. And I just encourage you to people and young people here, just believe in your gut and what you love to do. And money will follow. My business took over after 10 years. I mean, 10 years, what did I do? Meeting people. That's my intellectual property. I just published the book about the 10 art collectors in New York, that's my intellectual property because it's all my connections. I mean, I believe in Google, of course, the God, but I don't believe in the Google because there are things that you can knock on the door, but whoever opens the door for you is their choice, right? But for me, what's important is to person to person, face to face, eye to eye. To me, that's the most important thing. It's going to be more important as how the technology it develops, because I really believe in the directness and then the heart to heart relationship. To me, that's my intellectual property, and through that, the knowledge of my power of intellectual property is through the connection they become my friends, the dealers, artists. They become my own territory, my friends who are really loyal to me. To me, that's my intellectual property. Is very, very important. It's not in the legal paper, but it's all in the verbal and one to one. And it's very difficult. It's very hard. It's such a metaphor, right? But I believe in it because what's invisible to the eyes is most important thing in the whole world, and that's to me is intellectual property. So I value my connection and my friendship, my partnership with the friends to friends and people to people. So that's my knowledge and that's my power of intellectual property. So, yeah.
Yes, for me too. I work with a lot of contemporary artists. That includes photographers and video artists. And when we come into this field, I'm sure Mr. Sirota is just smiling because there's so much to deal with here. The edition numbers, the sizes, the price, and what is AP, artist plate, and after all that's gone, down the road. Now, how do we begin all this, and how do we price it? How do we reprice and all that? So instead of going all over this. Let me just give you a kind of funny episode. I don't really deal with the legal issues for the artists. They do it directly, I guess, with the lawyer. But as a curator, when I summon a lot of artist work, there are a lot of funny, episodes. And one of them is that this was while I was working as a director of the Yeosu International Art Festival. And so the festival is slightly different than biennial in the sense that it's not as theoretical. We're not trying to generate any kind of big discourse, anything. It's more vibrant, more energetic, and more festive kind of thing. And one of our video artist who is very well known in Korea. I'm not gonna name who it is because it's just supposed to be funny here. He specializes in making moving video out of already existing masterpieces. Like so you see Van Gogh in his image, or you see a very very important 16th century Korean something. So he's already using masterpieces in his work. And when we asked for his video, he was so concerned. Well, not him. His assistants were so concerned that what if somebody copy ours? So you kind of wonder. Okay, that's really good, but well, you didn't laugh. But well, I guess there are certain rule. You could copy up to certain period, right? You could copy a masterpiece by maybe 1930 or something. 50 years, isn't it?
It's 1923.
Right. So 1923. So after 1903, you would actually get into this problem. It is right of that assistant to worry about it. But when you're doing all that, parodying, and when your work is actually about pastiche, you kind of wonder why he is worried about other people copying his work, right? Now, I'm sure John has more to say things about this, but we get into a lot of these and we have a lot of fun with it. My job is to have fun with it. His job is to fix it.
Sounds fun to me.
It's a lot of, and if I can add a comment to both of these comments, the fun part of my job is no day is the same as the day before. I have new things coming in. Intellectual property are relationships.
Right.
Even though it might not fit into copyright or trademark, one reason to have an attorney or a legal counsel is to make sure you understand that your relationships are exclusive to you. And especially in the sales, everything, galleries and consignment sales, if you have a network of salespeople and you open up your Rolodex, I don't know if everyone knows what a Rolodex is. You open up your address book and your iPhone to show them everybody you know. You need to make sure there's a contract with that person that they're not going to circumvent you or cut you out. And I do these deals all the time. And fiduciary duty is so important, and disclosures and knowing who's on your side and who's on the other side. And commenting on what you mentioned, when you have all these new issues, it's amazing how many people go to Google and try to figure it out for themselves. And I have to say that there's something called fair use. There's something called First Amendment. There are a lot of different ways you can copy something exactly the same. And then there are ways you definitely cannot. Lawyers argue over this. They present in front of judges. The decisions get appealed. It goes all the way up to the highest court. And my client comes to me and says, listen, I've got $400. I just need a consultation. Just give me the answer. Can I do this? Yes or no? And I'm thinking, wow, this could lead to 18 years of litigation until we find the answer. But it's fun. My job is to put everything into a framework where they feel comfortable going forward. And some things, the answer is no. But I think what you're dealing with is exciting. Without you, my job is boring. So thank
I
you.
just want to
so
add
we work
something.
together, of course.
Thank you.
Just one recent incident. I mean, it happens a lot and also in everywhere, especially in Korea too. But because I go back and forth a lot now, Korea and New York. But just before you say things, but of course you're not going to show me the contract first. But listen to your client more, what they need first. Lead them to talk more rather than you speak, because what you have in your mind here, it's all your intellectual property. Once you verbalize it, it's not yours anymore. So just be careful about what client needs, because client can really, abuse you, and then in a good way utilize but just really be careful because I tend to be always like, this is good. I'm like, they write down everything and then contact. I'm like, after I find that, like, what did I just do? It's all my fault, by the end of the day. So you just lead the client what they need, ask question, lead them to talk more. Then, oh, okay, later, and then draft the contract, not serious one, but draft the contract, have them to sign first. They'll make them a little bit scared, little bit, it's like going on with the boyfriend, girlfriend. Yeah. I have a little bit of twist. That always help, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ask more questions. I think that was pretty key.
Yeah.
So I know the art world is very competitive, and just looking from your resumes, I know there are a lot of aspiring artists out here that are probably dying to know if you have any advice for them. What's the secret of making it? If you wanted them to just kind of leave this place with one thing, if you could just kind of give them a little bit of advice of what to expect out there.
In a way, I kind of grew up in a kind of analog era. So I'm in some ways I'm very thankful because I know how to wait. I know patience. I know what patience means. But recently, I talked to a lot of my colleagues and dealer friends at the galleries. It's like, oh my God, I can't deal with this young artist who wants to be Jeff Koons in 2-3 years, Andy Warhol in 2-3 years. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, especially young people. Like, yeah, they're like, they just keep on going. Like, oh, when are you gonna make me famous? When are you gonna my price has to go up? They really do not have patience. And then I think it's always about very much just the world gets so fast and you don't know the what principle is, the waiting, patiently waiting and just be diligent. I know it's just it's hard to say the advices because you hear it, you try to make it into execution, but it's not. It really doesn't come easy. But failure is a great lesson to learn from failure, to go through good experience, get the wisdom is the best experience. Of course, I don't want them to, oh, you fail and you get great. I don't do that, of course, and nobody wants to do that. But I think people just learn it from downfalls and you learn through the experience and make it into wisdom. Smart people, how many graduates, Harvard people who become, you don't have to go to Harvard to just be really famous or just be successful. You just really have to be very wise about it and kind of be savvy a little bit, but not in a bad way savvy, but knows who you are first and not doesn't matter what other world is around what tells you. What's the most important thing, what your heart tells you, who you become, who you will be as an artist or as a person. So I think that's the most important thing. So I'll tell them honestly. Yeah.
I guess there are a lot of artists and people interested in purchasing art and who deal in art here. I think the number one thing to remember is to file your copyrights. Copyrights are very inexpensive. You don't need an attorney to do them. You need patience and the ability to read the guides on the internet. You can do it online. Like $35, $40. It's worth it. Why? Because attorneys won't take your case if you don't have a registered copyright. I said before, if you doodle on a sheet of paper, you automatically have a copyright in your doodle. And this is true. The reason why people register their copyright is because it's deemed to be noticed to everybody that you own that piece. And because of that statutory right you have as a registered copyright, you're allowed to seek certain types of damages that you could not seek if you did not have the registration. You're also presumed to be the owner. You don't have to prove your ownership in court. So there are various procedural advantages. Proving damages, if somebody copies your image, instead of having to prove damages, there are certain statutory damages the judge is allowed to decide based on if it's innocent infringement or a willful infringement, and or if it's pirating, it's criminal infringement. So for $40, $45, it's worth your time. Make a pot of coffee. Don't pay an attorney to do this unless you have a complicated issue. Also, co-authorship. Oftentimes, people will create something. I work with musicians and artists and all types of people, and there's a collaborative environment, and people create. One person feels that they are the owner, they're the creator, and I'm sure the other person feels the same way. What do you do? Who owns it? If you're a musician and you have a jam session and someone's ninth cousin comes in and decides to, get on the drums and or guitar and she finds a hook that changes the whole song, is she now part owner of that copyright? Well, speak to your attorney or ask Mr. Google. But these are things that we don't know the answers to, but we know how to put paperwork in place to make sure. I say, you're coming in as a session musician. You're playing here as our guest, and you're not going to claim authorship, and all the rights will vest in us. These are simple documents that you should think about. And another thing is with selling art, fiduciary duty. A quick story. There's a famous piece of art that was valued at $3 million. The owner needed cash. The owner went out and said to a gallery and asked for them to sell the art. The gallery had trouble selling the art. They came back to the owner. They said, listen, it's damaged. We're not going to be able to get $3 million for it. Would you sell it for $1 million? $1 million cash in hand. Owner said, okay, we'll do it. Sold the piece. The contract between the owner and the gallery said, whatever the asking price is for the artwork, that goes to the owner. Everything above that goes to the gallery. Now, what the owner didn't realize was the gallery had already sold the piece for $2 million. Gallery made a quick $1 million, and the deficiencies or defects in the artwork apparently were claimed to have been over-exaggerated. This case settled out, but there's a buyer beware. A lot of times, if you're selling something, you're dealing with somebody who's curating or somebody who your attorney, who you trust. Your attorney, maybe he gets a percentage out of the deal if it closes. Those are dangerous deals to get into. Know who you're dealing with and make sure that you have everything written down and disclosed. Some people sell through third-party buyers, so you have to know where the money is going. So I think those are the two things: copyright, and when you're in a commercial transaction situation, be very careful. There's something that you need to take a step back from because it's not what you do day to day, and it's worth going to a lawyer. Otherwise, you might lose $1 million.
For me? Can I just ask you, how many artists do we have here? Okay, quite many. Curators? How many curators? So this is a very difficult question for me because I always have to struggle with it, how do I tell contemporary artists what to do? I don't even know what I'm doing. But yeah, be patient and be diligent. But also, I think if I may ask you to do one thing, it would be always ask what kind of artist you really want to be. Because there are many, many different artists. You could be a professional artist. You could be just world famous artist and be like Jeff Koons or Damien Hirst or whatever. But you don't have to be. If you don't want to be, you're fine with it, right? You could be an artist who are totally content with painting beautiful landscapes or beautiful flowers, and then this becomes way of your life. And then you could be an artist who could, always engage in, with your own artwork, and then these artworks become your healing session. So you have to kind of know where you are, and maybe for a young beginning artist, it's hard to kind of give up the idea that I'm never gonna make any money out of this, or I'm never gonna be an important artist or whatever. But in the end, you know best what makes you very, very happy. And not everybody's gonna be Michelangelo, but it doesn't matter. And I think same thing goes for curators. You do your best. You target the area that you want to work with. Obviously, I'm not ever going to apply for a Metropolitan or MoMA, maybe MoMA, but that's not because maybe I can't, also I can't. Maybe it's got to do with your ability or capability or whatever, but also strongly because maybe your interest is in somewhere else, So I don't know. It's a hard issue for me to deal with. I cannot ever advise anybody to be, anything other than knowing what they really want.
Yeah, so I think the key words there was patience and diligence, which is really hard to do. Now, if we have any questions from the audience, I'm sure there were a lot of things that we haven't covered. We have time for that. Okay.
As a legal counsel, outside of the box of legalities such as contract or trademark copyright, what advice would you give to attorneys who are fairly new and fresh into this field in terms of dealing with clients, artists?
Good question. Everything starts somewhere, and I deal with a lot of.
Repeat the question.
Uh, he's asking, other than the technical requirements of copyright and the contract issues, as a young attorney who wants to get into the field representing artists, what is the prudent steps? What are the prudent steps to take to be prepared for that? And the steps are, I think it was said already, meeting people. 10 years of meeting people. I'm still learning stuff. There are people in the audience here who I picked their brains before I came up here to find out what would be interesting to talk about. What do people want to know? It's impossible to know when you do it right, if you're doing it right, until 10 years pass and you look back. But I do know you know when you're doing it wrong. You know when you should have gone to that art opening, but you were tired or you wanted to go drink, at your friend's birthday party. You know when you didn't read that case about the art sale that went wrong. You know it's easier to know what you're doing wrong. If you ask yourself every week, and I'm not speaking about anyone in particular, but we should ask ourselves, what did I do wrong this week? What could I have done better? I think that will naturally eliminate all the things that are holding you back. I find that on the bar exam, there is no requirement to study intellectual property. This shocks my clients. New York State bar exam, I believe, covers 28 topics. Intellectual property is not one of them. I knew, surprising,
Nice.
isn't it?
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
Plus, when you take the bar, and I don't know the exact number, but you need a percentage, let's say 70% of the questions correct to pass. That means 30% chance what your attorney is telling you is incorrect. So if that's the starting point, and if IP is not part of the bar requirements, trust me, most of the attorneys are not studying IP. I discovered it in law school. I wanted to be a trial attorney. I wanted to be like the attorneys on TV and save the day. And then I
Say that.
save the day, and I stumbled into
Generation.
a Disney movie production agreement, and I read through it, and I just love all the details. And I start reading and reading and reading. So it's a long answer to your question, but I hope it's guidance for not just everyone in the audience, but for myself to keep reminding myself, what did I do wrong this week? Where do I want to be? Go to art shows, meet people, read about the cases, and also in this digital age, I think you need to brand yourself. Many years ago, word of mouth was how you found people. But if you don't brand yourself, and I'm not the best at branding. I'm in between the post. There were no cell phones when I was growing up. We had payphones.
Analog period.
Analog, exactly. I recently realized I need to brand myself because people are asking me. My business card doesn't say entertainment, business, and technology because everyone who knew me knew I did that. Now I'm reaching new areas, and I realize if I don't project who I want to become, I'll never become that person. So I hope that's a helpful answer.
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure.
Do we have any other questions?
Come on.
Yeah, come on.
One
Okay.
fun question,
Anything.
please.
We'll do this like-
We'll be end.
Let's do this like law school. We'll just call on people.
You
You have a question.
have some fun questions for
I think
me.
that gentleman in the tie has a question.
Regarding copyright and more like individual aspects. For example, I play a song I make myself on YouTube, And then you said, Rosita, Mr. Rosita, you said you emphasize that it's important to register copyrights just in case. But I'm just not professional singer or whatever, and I just play some songs I make, and then somehow it is hit on YouTube, for example, and then someone actually copies a part of my song, and then I don't know, release the album or more like a professional level, but I don't register my copyrights. And can I still like claim that that is kind of owned myself, like something like that?
Oh, that's a great question, and I'm not going to answer your specific case because I couldn't give specific legal advice at this point without knowing more. But in general, it's a great question. Many people are creating things every day without realizing it. It's not their full-time job. They do it because it's fun. It's fun. Creation is fun. I think we all enjoy that when we were kids at the beach making castles. Say you put a song on the internet for fun and somebody samples it. I think that's what we're talking about, sampling, and they use part of it in their song. How does it all work? I didn't register my copyright. Well, as I said, when you doodle in the margin, you already own the copyright in that doodle. The registration gives you procedural advantages, and most attorneys won't talk to you unless you have a registration. And there's a timing, technical timing, when the infringement occurs and when you have to have the registration. That's something you have to look at the facts about. So what is the end result here? The end result is you still have rights. It just becomes more onerous to pursue your remedies. And when I draft contracts, I'm always shocked that I don't want to say adversaries because they're transactions, but the counsel on the other side of the table, they're drafting about what their client wants, what they don't want to be sued about, and they're doing that. And I'm wondering, but what if it all goes wrong? What remedies do we have? So we're talking about remedies. In general, when should you register a copyright registration? When shouldn't? What should you be worried about when it comes to infringement? Well, if you're doing this as a hobby and you're not going to seek any lawsuits out of this, put it up on the internet. Let people enjoy it. Tell all your friends, hey, my song's part of that song. If you think you might have the wherewithal and the financing to go after somebody and you want to protect it, register your copyright. But something else to think about, if you go into this space and you register your copyright, that's one thing. But many people out there don't have their copyrights registered and they still have rights. And if you use their song or their piece of their song, you're infringing on their rights. And maybe they don't have a copyright and it'll be hard for them harder to enforce, but they can still come after you. So one of the areas that's difficult with derivative works is going after people who are using bits and pieces of your work versus you unintentionally or intentionally using bits and pieces of other people's work. It's a real fact pattern that you need to look at with an attorney if you want to go into the commercial space. So I hope that was a helpful answer to the question. One more question back there?
Yeah. As an attorney, sometimes I work with visual artists and their management, and there's like multiple people who wants to get involved or like wants to take ownership of the art. I'm just wondering, like, as an attorney, who are you exactly representing?
That's a great case, great question. I think it applies to all three of us up here. People come to us because they trust us for our opinions and our experience. We can lead them down the road that's going to make the most money for us, or we can lead them down the road that leaves them in the best position to continue being an artist. Sometimes it's a judgment call, and we're not even sure. It's a tough area to be. Attorneys are a little bit more rigid in the sense that we have an ethical code that we must follow, and all of my engagement agreements identify the client by name, whether it's an entity or a corporation. But when you're dealing with somebody selling your art or curating your art, advising you, and if it's multiple artists, in the ethics, if there are any other attorneys out there, in the ethics classes for entertainment, you always have that classic fact pattern representing a rock band. Who do you represent? What if the lead singer is the most famous one and they replace people and someone leaves? And it's a great fact pattern, but best discussed over wine, of course. But I'd actually like to, for me, it's easy. It's who's in my contract that is identified as the client. It doesn't mean who's paying for my services. I have benefactors who want to support an art colony and get all these creative artists to put their work together. They'll pay me handsomely. But my client is the artist. And if the benefactor comes to me and says, so what's going on? I'll say, well, a lot of things, but I can't tell you because even though you're paying me, my client is the artist. Attorneys have this all drawn out for them. I'd like to pass the question on, if I may, to my colleagues. How would you answer this as far as who's your client?
Mm, well, like I said, I wear different hats. Even as a curator, sometimes you work as a consigner or a consultant. So sometimes I work with a collector client, or sometimes I work with an artist client. I mean, maybe I wouldn't tell them they're my client, but in the end they are, because if there's any kind of contract or money involved, then you have that relationship. And it changes, but I do mostly work with, I think, artists. Artists. Wow, that's really hard to answer. But also, the institutions that I work with, the affiliates are my clients, because they're the ones who give me the work and also would sometimes pay me. Even sometimes I said that's very important to, note. So it varies. Our positions are always interchanging, I think, and I think that's important to kind of know, right?
It's important to
Right,
trust.
yeah.
That's what it comes reputation.
Yeah.
We're privileged to be up here, and it's Friday evening, and you've spent time with us. It's because you trust us, and in this case, you're all our clients right now.
Right.
In your situation, how
We're
do you?
here for business.
Yeah.
Now, lastly, may I?
No, yes, please.
I work for my client just because I'm a commercial. I mean, I'm an art consultant who pays, my client pays me to get the artwork for them. So I have to protect my client. So my clients are like whoever pays me into my pocket and going to my bank account is my client. I mean, let me be straight about it. But of course, I work with the artists who are, fantastic, but sometimes not in long time, and it's just very difficult to work with sometimes with the artists who are very, very, very artistic. Okay, let's put it that way. But I need a middle person who's in gallery. I love to work with a gallery who has their staffs on time, boom, 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 emails, images, boom. So, which means that who gives me money, but through my clients, but I work negotiate well. I don't really negotiate with the artist. I don't like the feeling. I don't know. It's me. But work with the negotiating with the gallery is very important and very clear, very, very, very professional. So it's because in the art world, what's fascinating about the art world, there's no rules. Let's say I sold, for example, I'll tell you something. I sold, let's say, 6-7 figure art. People think that, wow, you get 10%. That's a lot, but you don't. It all depends on the secondary market. You're my client, and I get from the gallery, and I'm the middle person. Let's just say that hypothetically 1 million, but you really want to get 95. Then how much do I get? 50,000 only. 1 million you could either get 50,000. If you don't negotiate, I only get 99,000. Then I get 10,000. But if I want to make my client happy, yes, I sell for 1 million for 10,000. Sometimes that's what artwork work. But what's important is ethical way. But people said auction, you can find everything. But it's not really it's not a Bible in auction record.
We would call it elastic rule.
Yeah.
Elastic.
Yeah. So you just what's really important is the relationship. The how royal relationship you have with your client and artist and the gallery. That's to me too. If I may conclude, that's intellectual property. That's I think for my side.
One more question.
Yeah.
Because this event is, being organized by the Korea Society and the KOTRA, which is a Korean government agency, this question pertains to everyone, but more for the two ladies. How has being Korean and knowing about Korea defined you as an artist or an art businesswoman in New York, which is supposedly the center of art world, and how have you faced disadvantages as being a Korean or Korean American art dealer or art businesswoman, or has that actually benefited you in various ways? And for Mr. Sirota, having lived in Japan, the same story.
Ladies first.
I guess I could go. Well, when we talked about compromises, that was the very beginning of my compromise. I think, after studying, art history, criticism, visual arts at, very renowned institutions, you wonder, okay, I'm gonna make it in London or New York, right? Okay, the internships were great. I worked at the Tate Britain. I worked at the new museums. Very, very established institutions, but what I realized that in order for me to promote, and in order for me to convey my curatorial expressions as a curator who promote Asian American or Korean American, that it was gonna take me another 15 years or 20 even. Well, let's see, that was back in 2005. So right now it's 2014. Still, most of majority of New York major art institutions do not show as many Korean art as you wish. So there was my first compromise. I'm gonna get out of here, and then I'm gonna promote my own artists or the artists that I think are important. So that was back in year 2000. But I'm an optimist. I have this great energy, and I'm so thankful for it. And I decided that okay, not everybody's going to be working at the new museum or at the MoMA or even at the Korea Society. Even here, but you could dig your own niche somehow if you have the knowledge, experience, and the endurance and personality to endure all that. So actually, for me, going back and forth between New York and maybe Washington and even LA, Chicago, Seoul, and actually 8 cities in Korea and Taipei, Singapore, Beijing have been just a bless for me. When I sort of compromised not to become a curator of a major institution here in New York, the world opened up to me. So I don't know if other people feels the same way about their decisions and their careers, but at least for me, being a bilingual, or actually I also speak Japanese because I lived in Japan as well. That really helped. And when the Asian countries were opening up, when China and like Hong Kong now, and when Taiwan was opening up, was great opportunity for me to go there and actually work with different kind of institution and people. People of all kinds of art, music, and this kind of interdisciplinary world. So for me, it was all great, and I'm really thankful. And that did not happen overnight, of course. Since 2000, so it's like 14 years. But one thing, if you're an independent curator and if you want to promote certain specific groups of people, you always have to sort of make your own structure, and then try to stay in the limelight. Otherwise, you're easily forgotten, or you're lost, right? So you're always on your toe, trying to get the extra review done, or trying to get an extra lecture done, and brand yourself, right? To try to not to be forgotten. And then working with Korean government, oh my God, that's been such an experience. But I actually went back to Korea starting from year 2006, and I sort of traveled my way around and started to put up exhibitions in Seoul, Incheon. I don't know if you know these cities: Pohang, Busan, Yeosu, and Gwangju. And I'm now targeting for Jeju and Pyongyang when the unification happens. That is. So it was such a privilege for me to go back to my own country, and then it was almost like a journey for me to find out about my own identity. So I think it all depends on how you see it, how you frame yourself, how you make your goal and how you go for it. So is that a positive note? Yeah. So.
I think I'm just going to be very simple about it. I mean, I started when I was 30, so you go figure my age, 15 years. When I started 30 at 1999, I was very afraid. I'm a Korean lady who are just got out of college. I mean, NYU graduate school, but like opening up the door for the whole art world in New York City, the center of the art world. And I wear a suit. I was like, oh my God, I have to look older, I have to look professional. I was like, cut like this. And I was like, 10 years, I mean, about 4, 5 years, I like always like dress properly and hi, you know. But did it really help? Not really, It's gotten to the point where I was more relaxed, when I'm more relaxed and more personable to people. And you just have to give a lot. I fed them a lot. I fed a lot of curator. I fed a lot of artists. That's when I started. Like a lot of party, a lot of dinner. Actually, dinner is fantastic. You just because as I told you about the person-to-person relationship, that's when I get a lot of information, auction record. Collectors' information, artists, and what's going to be happening in 2, 3 years in which artist show. It's like, Christina, it's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And that's amazing. So after that, I didn't have to wear a suit. I wore jeans, and then Jeffrey Deitch or anybody opened the door for me and was like, hey, Korean clients. So making long story short, now I'm identifying myself in Korea as an art consultant, New Yorker. New York, anything you know about New York, ask Christina. So that's my niche. I mean, this is, then what I said, I'm Korean lady who's like, yes, I will still identify as a Korean, but nowadays, Jewish marry Koreans, Indians marry European, they all look the same. But as long as you have your own personal voice that really tells you the truth and ethical way of being, I think that's your voice as a bigger picture. I mean, of course, I still love Korea. Okay.
And I have an advantage over people who aren't from people from Korea, is that I'm not Korean. I get to enjoy everything for the first time. I lived in Japan for many years, went to university there, speak Japanese, figured out how a lot of Japanese clients. Actually, the Korean side of the business is a lot more robust. I'm blessed to have a great Korean attorney at my firm. And I find that everyone speaks English, but it's nice to have Korean spoken also at the table. And my journey has been amazing. I find that with the thanks of the Korean government, the Korean people, there's a lot of support for arts. Mm-hmm. When I was a child going to school here in New York, we would have music class and art class, and we would had all these wonderful things. Well, apparently over the years, it's all been devalued. Mm-hmm. And I don't think schools really have it. And I think we're losing a generation of art appreciation. I am floored by the amount of information that the general Korean business person has about what's going on in the art scene, not just in Korea, but internationally. It's a really a cultural passion. And I have to say, I have an advantage. I get to enjoy this as a welcome guest. And it's something that I think we can inspire to reinstill in the American schools as well. So hopefully that's a good trend. You'll inspire us through your new artworks and your curation to do the same.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for all of your inputs. It was great for me to listen. I've learned so much. Now I can go out there to our openings and just kind of know more of what I'm talking about, I guess.
I know that art.
So any last call for questions? We had some really good ones. So, we do have one more.
I'm a Korean artist, and I consider myself young. Do you see any difference between Chinese artists, Japanese artists, especially young, like 30s, 40s artists? Do you see any patterns? Or you can compare previous, like 50s, 60s, you can compare with Nam June Paik's generation, especially to the curator?
Okay. It's a tough question again. I get all the tough questions. Therefore, I get to think a lot and then I get to come up with new shows. Obviously, in the 60s, there weren't that many Korean artists in New York. Nam June Paik was probably one of the few artists I know. There were like John Bae and Po Kim and, very, very well-known established artists already. But those artists were not as recognized by the mainstream anyway. So, let's say if we had Nam June Paik in the 60s, Japan had Kusama, Yoko Ono, and these ladies as well. But 60s was not the Asian time at all. Not even the 80s. Not even only starting from maybe the 90s. After the Queen's Museum show, the Asian artists started to be, to be more visible and be recognized and stuff. But stories are not that different. It's so, art world. It's a very, very tough nut to crack. It's not very permeable. We are all in New York, but we are all in different clusters. And it's like a toughest nut, and inside there's onion in it, so you have to crack the nut and then you have to peel the onion and
There's
you have to go
still inside.
yeah, right, but the difference is that now the contemporary art of Korea, contemporary of China, or contemporary of art or of Japan are more they're being more sought after because the national power, the economic stance or the international relations have changed, right? A lot of money, is moving to Asia, and there are a lot, I'm sure Krishna is aware of this, but a lot of collectors are coming out from Asia as well. So, when you know that there is more interest and money, coming from Asia, then people are going to start looking for Asian artists or maybe artists who have influence by Asia or whatever. So these things are kind of inevitable. But in terms of like artistic talent or the eagerness or the diligence and things like that, I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe this economical affluence have maybe made maybe some different kind of challenge, different kind of challenge. Maybe something is missing. A little bit. There's less hunger and less thirst from I think the artist side than maybe the artists from the 60s or 70s when
Maybe
there was absolutely nothing. Absolutely
Instant
nothing. Right, it was a survival back then, but right now, it's become maybe a little bit easier, but easier doesn't mean that it's better either,
But let me
proliferation, so many artists as well. So, let's say back in the 60s and 70s, there were only 5 or 6. Then actually they all became sort of contemporary art masters, right? But now there are 2,000 Korean artists in New York. How do you find the best 5? It's almost impossible, right? So there are good and bad, the advantages and disadvantages in this
I mean,
kind
we
of
can't give you an
situation.
answer, but
Right.
these days, how I talk to my dealer friends all the time, and I don't have the right judgment, the best judgment too. I have to ask my friends, what do you think about this art? This is for my client. This. Do you think that I mean, of course, I do believe in my judgment too, but in certain extent, I don't have a control over. So I ask a lot of my colleagues who are in the art world. But these days they said, you know what? People they like to see the artwork, not the CV. So people don't put their either countries, their gender, their age, even the school sometimes. So I think going back to your question about how do you judge or American or Chinese or Koreans, there are a lot of people, as I told you, people marry into marriages and now the boundaries are still blurring the art and design and country to countries. But what's important is the right artist that doesn't have how to say brand, like from this school, this gender, this collector has this. Of course, it does help, but it's not. People try not to judge from the genders, the sexism, gender, schools, and those kind of thing. They try so hard these days, and the people who really doing the right thing, the dealers, among the dealers, they say we don't look at the CVs anymore. We can't because that's what. And I was very impressed by their feedback. Like if you have that, you have a prejudgment towards the art. So we don't look at the CV anymore. We try not to. It's hard not to, but they don't. So I thought that was very interesting feedback. So,
All right. I think it's time for wine and chocolate now. But thanks so much. I think for everyone here, we're learning something absolutely new, and thanks for being very vulnerable and very personal with this talk as well. I really appreciate it.